Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back once again. Now, this part of the video is about the discussion of the comments. Comments 3 to 4 marks. But students, before starting the discussion about the comments, one important thing to notice that the last video that we discussed about the marking scheme, but this marking scheme also includes the professional skill marks, expectation of the professional skill marks. Do remember that you have attempted, if you have attempted the calculation part of the 15 marks, the part A that includes 15 plus 3, 18 marks. Out of that 18 marks, you have covered substantial marks with the calculation. And for this calculation, some of the professional marks you will be able to get automatically. Means here professional skill marks with analysis and evaluation. The point mentioned, appropriate use of data to determine suitable calculations. So this part is actually about calculation. If you appropriately pick the data from the question and understand the requirement properly and determine a suitable calculation, that's whatever we have done here. So I must say the PSM related to calculation, PSM professional skill mark related to calculation, you will already be able to get. The important thing is that how much accurate you have done and how much properly present the thing. For example, the left side complete the things here, but right side here working. So you mention the working numbers as well. So proper structure of the working and accuracy of the working, automatically you will be able, not the technical marks, but also the professional skill marks for this part. But on the other hand, now it's time for the part A. Out of total 18 marks, comments including PSM, professional skill marks, at least having 5 to 6 marks. And what's examiner expecting from our side about comments? Write the comment in a way that also includes the professional skills marks. How? Number one, appropriate use of the data to support discussion. That's whatever you have done within the question, this one. Use this information for the discussion. And then make a discussion and having an appropriate conclusion. Means your final conclusion is not like this, okay, except forward contract. No, use the data and make discussion. And do remember, discussion means for every hedging techniques, some plus points, some minus points. Some plus points, some minus points. So that is called supportive discussion. Then appraise of information objectively to make hedge recommendation. Whatever your discussion, that should be objective. Objective means whatever your whatever the discussion you are making, that is some purpose based to make a conclusive decision. Moreover, definitely you can challenge the evidence or assumptions. Part A as well, whatever the assumptions here, for example, basis assumptions, for example, margins assumptions. Commercial acumen, effective use of example or practical consideration related to the context to illustrate points being made relating to hedging transactions. Treasury discussion, ignore this. We will discuss B part. Commercial acumen means be practical. Here, be practical means incorporate some examples. Incorporate some examples. What examples, sir? What type of examples? Here, for example, if FRA, if we are considering FRA, question is not mentioning about the default risk, about the default risk related to OTC, over the counter contract, default risk. But you add on the point, the chances of default risk in case of forward. So your example, your illustration, which is not within the question but relevant to the question, that is called illustrate or practical consideration. Illustrate or practical consideration. That's a key point. So commercial acumen means be practical. It's not only about constraints, opportunities. Here, for the risk management, whatever you are discussing the hedging technique, you need to incorporate more things. Sir, any more example? Yes, why not? For example, futures contract margins. Here, assumption, the margins. You critique with the skepticism as well, but also incorporate your knowledge that initial margin and variation of the margin affect to the decision of future contract because it's actually impact the cash flow of the business. Cash flow of the business. That's a key point. Same points. For example, in this case, option is the most worst situation. Option, highest cost. But you, with your knowledge, with your illustration, you will mention that it depends on the attitude of risk. There are 4 hedging techniques. First 3 techniques is a binding contracts, but option having the flexibility. If interest rate not rise but drop, option will be valuable, but require the initial cost. That's called your practical aspects, your examples, but to the point, specific. Do remember, incorporate examples. Okay. Whenever you are incorporating the examples, 2 things bear in your mind. Relevant to the case, number 1. Number 2, within the time management and marks management. Now come on. Sir, if we are doing the thing, comment for 3 to 4 marks. What we should do first? First, mark my words. Don't start the question or writing or calculation without any planning. Plan, especially for theory. Determine your direction, how much time here, that is time management. Here, for example, 3 to 4 multiplied by 2.25 is equal to almost 9 minutes. And marks management. Marks management means how much to write. The answer is according to the marks. If it's 4 marks, at least 3 here for hedging conclusion. You have to spend time for 3 to 4 well explained points. It's not 3 to 4 marks, it's actually 5 to 6 marks. I must say 5 to 6. Why? 3 to 4 technical, 1 to 2 PSM, professional skill marks. 3 to 4 technical, 1 to 2 professional skill marks. Overall, this is approx 5 to 6 marks. So professional marks are not isolated. Whatever you are writing here, that professional marks indulge within the points. So 4 multiply, it's not 4, it's at least 6, or okay, 5 multiplied by 2.25. So you have almost, I can say, 12 minutes. So for 5 to 6 point, you have to mention 4 to 5 well explained points. That is how much. Now plan what to write. What to write means, think about, sir, what are the key points? Cartoonic images, key points. Number one, the very important point, what to write. First, always start your answer with interpretation of facts. What facts, sir? Start with this. Interpretation of the facts. Number one, forward. Number one, futures, giving the best. Then forward, then swap, and the least future options. Not writing in this manner. You have to interpret the things. Here forward, here futures contract provide the higher one, where forward and swaps are slightly lower borrowing cost, but the most worst situation is the option contracts. That is how decorate your line, one or two. Decorate your decorate with 1 or 2 lines. Interpret these facts. That's all. Number one. The first thing is that. Number two. Now, if there is something discussion, so plus and minus both point. Automatically, whenever you are incorporating plus or minus, so minus point something is skepticism. Automatically incorporating. About each hedging choices. Try to cover each hedging choices. All hedging choices. For example, about forward, what you will mention, even forward, swap, both. These are OTC contract. And there's a chance of default risk. But if you mention the forward and swap are the over-the-counter contracts, and there are the chance of the default risk. If you mention that, these are the not complete statement, because here the company mentioned the bank name, so chances of the counterparty default protected by the bank in the case of swap, and the bank reputation in the market is higher, so automatically the chances of defaults is lower. So first, if you critique the point of defaultness, complete your scenario with the counter of that critic as well. We will discuss this point with the main solution. Future, what you critique about the basis risk. Basis is not move exactly as we are predicting now. Moreover, margin impact on the decision or the cash flows. That's the point. But here, for option, you cannot ignore completely. Cannot ignore, or we cannot kick out the option from the race or option from the game. Cannot ignore 100%. Although it's the most worst scenario, 5.571, highest borrowing cost. Because here, if the condition become favorable, so we can lapse the only the option of lapse with the option contract. But on the other hand, if there is an advantage, but the point is that premium cost. So you have to critique the thing accordingly, but also accumulate the thing to develop the conclusion. Although here we can normally with the hedging techniques, we cannot exactly say that you have to do exactly the same. But with the minor final comments, we have to make a statement either about which one is the benefit. For example, if you are taking the cost of premium and wanted to hold the game with your own parameters, then go for option. Otherwise, forward or swap is the best deal considering the coverage of default risk. This type of final statement. Now come on. This is the answer I've crafted for the student to mix the things. That is some uncalled student caliber answer. Number one, compare FRA, future contracts, swaps. Give the result which is marginally worse. Sorry. Compare FRA and the future. FRA and futures swap gives which is marginally worse. Then the option gives the worst result among all. So you start with the facts. If you compare the FRA and futures with the swap, that's marginally worse. But the option, it's about most worse. So start with facts. Number one. Then, come on, incorporate your practical illustrations, criticisms, plus points, minus points with every hedging technique. For example, here, risk might be considered, include counterparty risk for the forward and swap. Using bread and bank should mean risk is low for forward agreement and also for swaps, assuming bank bear the risk of counterparty. You can add things if the bread and bank credibility is better, forward rate risk, and the swap counterparty risk bear by the bank. So this point is covered. So that is the point for forward. Critical assessment. And here covered the skepticism point as well. PSM, skepticism. That's the point. Further, counterparty risk cover. Basis risk should also be considered in the trade futures. Now, here about after forward the futures. If we consider futures, the issue is basis risk. What is about? We assume that no basis risk, diminished to zero at contract maturity, as mentioned question. But this is not the guarantee. An actual basis at closeout date, connect with the case. At closeout date, the lurk shell company face at 1st September might different from expected basis. If it's different, this may mean whatever the future contract we have chosen, that was not the lower cost. Here, the futures is 5.6% means that back up the assumption, lock-in rate, back up the assumption, basis risk. This 5.6% based on this, that basis is reduced gradually. If not actual rate, if it's not gradually, maybe this rate become higher. So we will be regret at that time that we chosen the forward at the date of 1st May that was not the lowest borrowing cost. So that is the point of futures. Once again, critical assessment. This is critical assessment. That's a key point. Critical assessment includes professional skill marks, skepticism, and as well as practical consideration here. Your illustration that this may not necessarily that this will happen exactly. Further, about the futures, initial margin requirement and variation margin need to be funded. Impact on the cash flow. This is pure commercial acumen point. Yes, you can say that is capitalism as well. Here we ignore, or I can say that you critically challenge the statement mentioned in the question. You challenge in the question is mentioned ignore margin requirement. But here you say that no, practically this actually happen and impact on the cash flow. So here is skepticism and commercial acumen both. Now swap. For the swap, if local company fixed rate debts, fixed, swap is fixed, it faces the market risk of unexpected fall in interest rate. Swap is like a forward contracts, long-term forward contracts. It's a lock contract. It's OTC lock contract. So here I mentioned that if you enter with the swap, so you are actually bound if there is something situation that interest rate will become reduces, then you have to pay the same amount, because here in this scenario you have established swap, final answer become fixed rate. Fixed rate. You have converted from floating to fixed. If interest rate down with floating, you will get advantage. But by swap agreement at the end, you have to pay the fix. If interest rate down, you will not get any advantage of the down in interest rate. That's critic. And this is PSM. Like you have identified the matter, you can say skepticism and commercial acumen as well. Practical consideration. What if this interest rate decreases? Then, sir, how much the points? At least 4 to 5 points. We need to cover all of them. Although option contract reflecting highest borrowing cost, you have to develop the scenario of option. Yes, it's a highest, but advantage over others. Because advantage over others as above. Because prices are not fixed, and let the option lapse if rates move favorable. But the premium cost needs to be paid. Option contract. Here, pure commercial acumen, CA commercial acumen. Be practical. Be practical. We cannot ignore. Worst, but we cannot ignore. If we just pay the premium cost, the game is in our hand. We have a fear that interest rate will increase. If increases, we will exercise. If not, lapse. But these lapse or these flexibility not available with above. So this is a technical point and your practical illustration as well. Final comments. Final. The length of, this is the final comment. Do remember, with the scenario of hedging, forex or interest, no need to make exact final comment. Do this. It, because there are multiple hedging techniques, all have their own dynamics. The length of swap need to consider, because normally swap available for long term. Here the company wants to borrow 6 months. If the company plan has become changed, because here the company have a plan for expansion for as well, long term investment. And if the company plan become changed, short term to long term borrowing. So nothing others hedging techniques will be available or will be beneficial. Only the swap will be beneficial, because swap can be made short term and majority case the long term. So here the length of time of swap also need to be considered. If local borrowing turns out to be longer than 6 months, swap may provide better time match than other hedging techniques. That is what about the answer you need to write. Yes, I'm saying that if actually the issue is that with this question, if we compare forward, futures and swap, so difference is not much substantial, so we must take care about the final comments. Not very much differences. The differences are very minor, but anyways, that is about the question, complete question. One last thing I wanted to discuss once again. Now you need to cover, ask yourself, have we covered all these things till now, not considering the B part? Appropriate use of data to determine suitable calculations. Yes, ask yourself. We have done with the PSM. Appropriate use of data, support discussion, and appropriate conclusion. Yes. Is your information objectively used? Means for purpose based? Yes, the purpose is hedging recommendations. Have you effectively challenged the evidence or assumptions? The basis risk, margins, counterparty risk, challenge. Have we used some examples? Use some examples or practical consideration? Here ignore, question mention ignore the margin. We counter that, no, need to consider. We incorporate risk of defaults. We incorporate that point, the option is not out of the game. We incorporate if the company plans for investment is a long term, and what if the borrowing plans is also long term, then swap will be usable. That's commercial acumen. Do remember, the professional skill marks, it's not any isolated or something out of the world. Just you need to develop the writing skills in a beauty, in a decorative manner. That's all. At final point, as I'm concluding the point here, this question was originally examined March, June 2019, where PSM not introduced at that time. PSM introduced September 22. But here are the examiner comments related to technical marks. Only for technical marks. only for technical marks, one by one. Just need to identify what common mistakes students did during the exam. Number one, with respect to option contract, the common mistakes. Common errors include making mistake in determining number of contracts. So you need to cover the formula properly. Remaining basis, or for remaining basis, you must be perfect. If I'm going to exit at 1st September and I have taken the September contract, so remaining 1 month. Premium calculation. Simple premium calculation. Take out the percentage of the premium. Be conscious, either put or call. Here put. Multiply by percentage, apply with the contract size. Contract size. Multiply by number of contracts. Multiply by contract size. Multiply by default 3/12. Okay. So what the complaint about swap? Common errors included not knowing whether company should borrow at a fixed rate or floating rate. The students are mixed. At that point, student mixed. Do remember, swap always start with a more comparative advantage. So you need to aware that. Significant minority of the candidates spend time calculating the impact of futures in FRA, even though these were given. So this statement, I must say, if you are not, if the students not reading the question properly, very carefully, that happens. So here, if FRA and futures already available, this result poor time management and was due to not reading the question properly. Yes, connected with point. Last, most candidates made relevant comments, but quite often these were brief and did not gain full marks. Why? Because you haven't, you just says that for 5 to 6 marks, just 3 to 4 lines. No. Yes, the answer must be precise but complete. Number one, start with facts and all the hedging, incorporate all dynamics of the hedging techniques, all plus minus, and then make a final comments according to the case. So thank you very much about this part of the video. That's all over with the part A aspect. Take care a lot. Next video is about the part B of log shell. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.